Recording in progress.
Shabbat Shalom. This week, I struggled to write a Devar Torah. On Wednesday, I had a singular focus, edit and publish the podcast. What should have normally been hours became all day. I was fighting uphill like the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was pushing the boulder up the hill and kept falling back down again. Then, all of a sudden, it all worked out. So I thought. Thursday morning, I thought I would just follow some notes I took earlier in the week. I knew the basic scriptures of the Parsha. This week, as you've seen by now, is a double reading. Numbers 19 through 25. And, depending upon the source, 2 Haftorahs and 2 different Brit Hashah readings. I read everything, and it was a lot. So I'm going to give you a few highlights. In Numbers 19, the Holy One of Israel introduces the red heifer, whose ashes are used to purify from uncleanliness. In Numbers 20, the people complain against Moses and is given an opportunity to glorify Adonai in full view of the people, just by talking to the rock. Instead, Moses loses his temper and he strikes the rock. Aaron, the high priest, must pass his priestly robes to his son, Eleazar, and he is gathered to his descendants. Miriam, the prophetess, is also gathered to her family. In Numbers 21, the people complain again. This time they hate the manna from heaven. They're complaining about a lack of water, even though they saw water come out of a rock. This time, Adonai had had enough. So he sent, now listen carefully, cherubim nachash against the people. And what is that? It's a hissing, fiery, flashing serpent who's more deadly and visually striking than most venomous snakes that we have today. Now, here's a fun fact. The talking serpent in Genesis is also a cherub, nachash. That would be enough for an ordinary week. That's it right there. Any one of those could be a major topic. But instead, we had a feast of lessons and a full table to digest. A meal. In Numbers 23 to 24, we see a prophet named Balaam. He's enlisted by Balak to curse the hordes who, in his words, would lick up everything like the ox licks up the grass of the field. Very colorful. Matter of fact, it's one of the most colorful stories in the entire Torah. So if you have not read it, please take your time and read it. On the way to comply with the evil king, Balaam receives a lesson in humiliation from a talking donkey and an angel who's in no mood to play around. His sword is drawn. This is not Shrek and Donkey, but a prophet who knew and talked to the God of Abraham. Let that sink in for a moment. Of course, we all know that the Ruach of Elohim opened the eyes of this evil prophet, and from his lips poured out the blessings we recited today. But Balaam and Balak found another way to cause trouble by using the alluring women of Moab to entice the former slaves with rich delicacies. Keep in mind, they were eating manna. And blinding, lustful sex. Let's call it what it was. They were a sex cult. But a once rejected son of Aaron, named Pinchas, or Phinehas, depending on which translation you read, he rose up and he put a stop to the Moabite conspiracy with the tip of a spear, driven right through a couple caught in the act in broad daylight. Like I said, any one of these topics, full sermon. So I began to write a message, but it was a different message. I started down a path and I was convinced this was going to be a really good message. Oh man, this is going to be great. Then, just like Balaam, I ran into a wall. The inspiration stopped. It dried up. For a painter, it's that pause when you fill your brush with paint, you know exactly what you want to do, and then you stop just before you look at paint that canvas, and you're frozen. You're not sure anymore. All right? It's also, for those of us who are writers, it's also when a writer stares at a blank page. Now, back in the old days, they used to have typewriters, so the blank page was much more dramatic. Today, you're staring at a blinking cursor. Either way, in that moment, 100 streams of thought can just simply go silent. It's not nirvana. It's not a distraction. It's just a long, quiet pause. So I stepped back. I prayed and I realized I am fighting with the Ruach. It's not even a contest. Not even close. When the inspiration stops, there is nothing coming. You see, earlier in the week, just before falling asleep, one word popped into my mind. I wrote it down. And the next morning, I looked at the word and I scratched my head. This came to me Shabbat night or early Sunday morning. And I looked at the word in the morning and it was conviction. I said, really? Was that it? Was that, what am I supposed to do with the word? It's not even in the Bible. Conviction? So, was I missing something? I was. Yes, I really was. You see, the branches were slapping me in the face, and I just kept pushing them away, thinking it must be something else. While I was studying Acts earlier that weekend, while I was studying Acts and considering the trials of Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Priscilla, and numerous other emissaries, I tried to imagine living in those years, living in those days. Saul, who would later change his name, lived between two different worlds. He learned Torah with one of the greatest minds of the period, Gamliel. He is in the scriptures, by the way. He was also a Roman citizen, which had to be a Roman citizenship had to be bought or you had to earn it. Somehow Paul was a Roman citizen. He knew what he wanted to be, and he knew what he was equipped to do. Saul likely was convinced in his mind that Yeshua of Nazareth was a false prophet. You know why? Because there were stories circulating in that time period, how his disciples must have somehow overpowered this burly garrison of Roman soldiers, somehow overpowered an entire garrison. Then they rolled back a stone slab sealed that would require 4 men to push it in place. And then they smuggled his lifeless body away, and they claimed it was a resurrection. All of that was just stories. Perhaps that is why he roused up all the other Jewish believers to stone Stephen. Now, Stephen was a young man who seemed like he was possessed. And in a way, he was. Suddenly, he was eloquent and versed in the Torah. And he was filled with insight and wisdom well beyond his years. He was a young man. The angry mobs, all worked into a fervor, were convinced Stephen needed to die. And they threw off their cloaks and they left him at the feet of the man who encouraged them, Paul of Tarsus. Saul, his name was Saul of Tarsus. Saul, you see, lived his life based on his convictions. Let that sink in for a moment. So let's talk about what is conviction. All right, the dictionary says the act or process of finding a person guilty of a crime, especially in a court of law. Also, the final judgment entered against a defendant after a finding of guilt, or a strong persuasion or belief. Closer. Also, the state of being convinced of error or compelled to admit the truth. Conviction is belief grounded in evidence or experience. It's not what you think it is. You have to have evidence, and there must be experience. And typically, someone has to teach you. You hold your position, your mental position, because someone or something has persuaded you. In some cases, a person is willing to die or even to kill for their convictions. Most of the time, we enlist them in our armies and we call them soldiers. But let's get back to this message. So what I did not say is that night that I got that word, that single word, conviction, that night before I went to bed, I had a heart-to-heart with the Father. And I confessed to him that after studying now Paul for all these weeks, I have a different understanding of Paul. Better when I put him back in his actual Jewish context. That's a whole different story, and we have a podcast for that, but the truth is that Paul is just as Jewish as Yeshua. Paul, like Peter, James, and Yeshua, were completely Jewish. Paul lost his head to Nero as a Jew, never a Christian. Christianity was not invented yet. But before I fell asleep, I felt that word and I just didn't understand it. So I just wrote it down and I went to sleep. Remember, conviction is grounded in evidence. The person is convinced and they have been persuaded by their teachers most of the time. Many of the most Torah-educated people in the first century, like Paul, also had something we call confirmation bias. Okay, another term is not in the Bible, but I want you to understand how we think. Confirmation bias is the tendency to recognize, trust, and remember information that supports what we already believe. Think about that for a moment. That's how many of us are able to read the book of Acts and see Christianity. You know what? Christianity is only mentioned, if I remember correctly, 3 times in the entire Bible. 3 times. 3 times. That's it. And never in reference to a faith. Only to a people as an insult. Okay? Let's go forward. So confirmation is a bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to recognize, trust, and remember information that supports what we already believe. The bias in your mind and then doubt. The bias in your mind will then allow you to doubt or reject any information that challenges it. Does that sound familiar? I think every single person in this room has had this experience either with a family member or with yourself, myself included. Think of Paul. Think of Thomas, Peter, Moses, James, the brother of Yeshua. All of these men were men of conviction. All of them. Peter was really ready to whip his sword out and kill the soldiers when they came to arrest Yeshua. That was out of his convictions. It's not a lack of intelligence, nor is it dishonesty, but it is stubborn and it's stiff-necked, and sometimes it becomes very aggressive. The crazy thing about confirmation bias, or a stiff neck, which is what we're all more familiar with, is that when mixed with conviction, it becomes volatile. And to put it simply, violent. A person will aggressively get in your face, command your full attention, stand their body right in front of you, get your full attention, and they'll raise their voice. I said, have you heard anything like that before? It's been said, right? Don't get me wrong. A person of conviction strengthened by bias, his own biases, his or her biases, they command respect. And history is filled with men and women, big and tall, short and small, weak and strong, who moved whole nations and empires out of the power of their conviction. We love them. But there's one other strange thing about conviction. Convictions can be updated and uprooted by new evidence or new experiences. And that's very important, because I mentioned some men, but I didn't say what happened. Because humility and the miraculous can change convictions. They can tear right through any of your confirmation biases. That's what a miracle is. That's one of the definitions. When that happens, a person changes on the inside, and faith can now grow in your heart like a cactus in the desert. You see, there is room for all of us. It was that power of conviction and bias and the fact of living in 2 worlds that made Moses exceptional. And it made Paul exceptional too. In each man's life came the miraculous, and one other thing. The voice of the Holy One of Israel changed them forever. Each man needed compelling divine intervention to reshape their understanding of the worlds they lived in. And that made Moses and Paul men capable of destroying empires. Moses took down Egypt. It took them years to recover. Years. And they may never have recovered the greatness that they once had. Paul did the same, but not under a Christian banner because there wasn't one yet. Paul took his Torah scrolls into the cities of Greece and Turkey, Acacia, and he convinced Jewish believers from the Holy Scriptures, from our Holy Scriptures, that Yeshua is the Messiah. And thousands believed, Jews and Gentiles. Paul, the same young man who had consented to the death of who knows how many believers in Yeshua, after recovering his sight, was now commissioned to go to the Greco-Roman nations and to convince other Jews and God-fearers that the risen Messiah who spoke to him from heaven, was prophesied in the same Torah that we read every Shabbat. Think about that. He had no New Testament. Not a single book had been written yet. He had the Torah scrolls, and he convinced thousands that Yeshua is the Messiah from the Torah. Along the way, some Greeks and Romans put aside their idols and their false convictions, and they came to embrace the God of Israel. The latter part of the book of Acts is about Paul standing before other Jewish men and women and showing them the evidence that Messiah is in the books of Moses, in the prophets, and in the Psalms of King David. Some men and women, Jewish, Greek, and Roman, were unwilling to let go of their long-held convictions. They had biases and beliefs and traditions, and they were willing to fight to keep those convictions. They formed bloodthirsty mobs. Paul and others learned that faith mixed with conviction is a powerful tool. It's a powerful thing. Strong enough to break down the altars of the gods of men. Now we say that, we toss it around. But do you know who those altars were? Zeus, Apollo, Artemis, Athena. These gods were thrown down not by soldiers, but by Paul. Read the book. Read with me. He survived stonings, drownings, and snake bites. It is that kind of faith that is able to crumble an entire empire from the inside. Rome was weakened when it lost its gods. Paul, like Moses, would leave us valuable insights and knowledge. And yet, through it all, you can read and feel the humility and the beautiful fruits of the Ruach in his words. Let me read something for you. Many people have turned this against believers, but let's read it honestly this time. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah Yeshua has set you free from the law of sin and death. For what was impossible for the Torah, since it was weakened on account of the flesh, God has done, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and as a sin offering, he condemned sin in the flesh, so that the requirement of the Torah might be fulfilled in him? No, it says in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Ruach. These are not the words of a devout Jewish man putting down the Torah. Not at all. Actually, what they are is rather a deeper understanding that the Torah is so perfect that our flesh is incapable of fulfilling it. The Torah is so perfect, perfectly written, perfectly rendered, perfectly preserved to this day, and none of us are capable of fulfilling it. Paul's biases have been shattered. That once volatile man willing to go to war and to fight to kill the people who came up with ideas that were different from his, he is now an advocate. Paul's biases had been shattered. Listen to this. Again, keeping in mind, this is a devout Jewish man. For the mindset of the flesh is hostile towards God, for it does not submit itself to the law of God, for it cannot. It can't. We just can't. Romans 8, verse 7. The Holy One of Israel had to do it himself because we are incapable of doing it. But he didn't just, do the thing and then disappear. Not at all. As a matter of fact, when he ascended to heaven, he left us a working path. His ruach, his spirit, that spirit that was in him when he was here, he gave it to his disciples, his Talmudim, and he told them to give it to others. His spirit, that is how we can learn to walk according to the ruach. But, as Paul says in Romans 8:10, but if Messiah is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, yet the spirit is alive because of righteousness. You will continue to sin. You will continue to miss the mark. You will continue to fall short. It's okay. I'm not saying to continue to sin on purpose, like some have said. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about confessing your sin before God and recognizing you need to change and asking him to be a partner with you because he's put his spirit in you and he will help you. Did Paul, a devout Jewish scholar, say that the Torah is abolished? Definitely not. Definitely not. So where is these other faiths coming from? He said we can't fulfill the Torah because of the weakness of our flesh, our minds, and I'll add our stiff-necked biases. So Adonai stepped in and finished the job that he knew we could not do. That message, as you can imagine, was hard for proud, confident people to accept. Not only for Jewish scholars, and we talk a lot about that, but it was hard for the Greco-Roman scholars as well. And not just for the Greco-Roman scholars, but the Greco-Roman artisans, all those people who was creating statues and selling them as gods. They were out of business, and they were not happy. It was harder for the Greeks and Romans, by far, because they had conquered the whole world in the name of their false gods. This is well known. I'm not teaching you anything new. It's there in the books, in the history books. We today would be wise to be aware that although you may have the Ruach of Elohim in you, we cannot grieve that spirit by falling back into our human confirmation biases and our deeply held convictions in our minds. You know, those Christian thoughts that pop up every so often? That you have to push them down because are they grounded in true faith? Are they grounded in scripture? Or are they grounded in teaching that somebody taught you? And I don't mean to attack Christians only because the truth is many Jews also have confirmation biases that allow them to not accept Yeshua. This is what Paul speaks of when he says, for the time will come when they will not put up with sound instruction, but they will pile up for themselves teachers in keeping with their own desires, to have their ears tickled. That sounds good to me. Oh man, yeah. Oh, I feel it. Oh, yeah, it's amazing. We gotta go back there again. They don't want to hear sound instruction. They want their ears tickled. And they will turn away from hearing the truth and wander off to miss. Sound familiar? 2 Timothy, written near the end, when Paul was very much near the end of his life. Is that time right now? Does anybody recognize any patterns at all in anything I just said? Do we not shop around for teachers who say what we want to hear and already believe? That's what confirmation bias is. Hunting around for teachers to find teachers who say what you already believe. you're not able and ready and wanting to hear the sound truth from the scriptures. Near the end of his commission, Paul realized that the Lord Yeshua had kept his promises and that he had walked away from death several times along the way. Paul, like Moses and Aaron, realized they had fought the good fight against themselves and against empires with the help of the Holy One of Israel.
Recording in progress.
They had crowns waiting for them. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. In the future, there is reserved for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not to me only, but also to anyone, to everyone who has longed for his appearing. What is that? What is that state of mind? What is that state of thinking called? What is that called? I'll tell you what I believe it is. It's called shalom. It's called simcha, and it's love. Now, these are big words, so I'm going to break them down in this context. Paul, the emissary to the nations, put aside his convictions and allowed them to expand and grow in the knowledge of the one he persecuted. And in the process, he learned to walk in true faith and in spirit. The kind of faith and spirit that we saw in Abraham, Isaac, and in Jacob. When faith comes, it comes with many blessings. And some of the sweetest are simcha, or joy, shalom, and love. Those, in turn, lead to an outpouring of mercy and justice and faithfulness. Faithfulness to the provider of life and his children. In other words, someone offends you, you can put it away. It's okay. Let it go. You know, when you play sports, sometimes you have a bad play. You know who loses? The people who hang up on that play, that bad play. You know who win? The people who say, I messed up. Oh man, all right, that's all right, I got the next one. That's the attitude you need to have when someone trespasses against you. Those, in turn, lead to an outpouring of mercy, justice, and faithfulness to the provider of life and his children. What are these called? Yeshua called them the weightier matters of Torah. Justice, mercy, and faithfulness. In other words, when you engage with the Torah, you learn the weightier matters, the things beyond the writing. Now, simcha, sometimes translated as joy, is more interactive than just feeling good. Simcha is not jumping up and down or losing control, but it's the quiet joy of fulfilling a divine command, caring for others and serving them and expecting nothing in return. Shalom, oh, that's a beautiful one. Shalom is the peace one feels when they are home and around others that let them feel safe or cared for. And most of all, the understanding that life is wonderful, even if we have some problems. The life is still wonderful. That's one of the reasons why, and that is a good reason why when you wake up in the morning, you should recite the Modea Mi. Even if it's in English, doesn't matter. Or Spanish or Portuguese, whatever the point. The point is, give thanks to God for life. Every morning, without fail. Life is an opportunity to worship the giver of life. Love, a big one. Oh, that one. Oh. We have destroyed what it means. Love is sometimes more powerful than any other emotion because it has unlimited levels. You can love someone and not know why. You can love someone and forgive them for all their trespasses against you. That's what Yeshua is talking about. And you can love so passionately that the world melts around you because you have been in touch with the Ruach, the gifts of the Spirit. The philosopher William James once said, conviction says, I am sure, while faith says, I am committed. All these gifts, blessings, and so much more are valuable to you when you combine your faith with conviction. How do you get that conviction? You're going to have to study the scriptures to get your conviction. I'll repeat. These blessings, these gifts, and so much more are available to you when you combine faith with conviction in the Father of all spirits, and in his Son, the Holy One of Israel, the only one able to complete the perfection of the Torah. Shabbat Shalom.